My name is Melody Smith. I'm the president of North Star Farm Tour and the co-owner of Clear Spring Farm. Today we're going to share with you North Star Farm Tour's final outreach project. Today's story is a unique one. It is told through the authentic voices of our farmers, our technical cooperators, and our external independent evaluator. 3 years of qualitative and quantitative surveys tell a story of resilience that even the pandemic couldn't stop. On behalf of North Star Farm Tour, I would like to extend a sincere thank you to the state of Minnesota for the opportunity to be involved in the Sustainable Agriculture Demonstration Grant.
Well, I never did agritourism until I became a part of North Star Farm Tour. You know, people might stop by just curious to see the alpacas, but nothing formal, nothing that ever really made me, or nothing that generated income. So doing that, I haven't actually had a tour at my house or at my own personal farm. I've been lucky enough to go to both Clear Spring Farms and Windswept Hill and bring some of my animals with me and sell my products, get people interested in alpacas, and just, network. I actually had someone who came to my one event this year and she said, "Oh, I usually see you on the farm tour, but since I couldn't do that this year, I came to see you here."
When we first got together with for one of the member farm potlucks, that was a huge moment for my wife and I. Just knowing that there were other people doing this, living this way, raising these strange animals, making yarn and other products, sharing with the public. We didn't think that was, well, it's probably not normal. We didn't think it's definitely not mainstream, but it was really enlightening to see that we weren't as out there as we thought. We had been getting the message from visitors to our farm that there was definitely an interest in people, living this way or, doing the hobby thing or micro homesteading, if you will. But we weren't aware of others doing it. So it was really nice just to have informal conversations and just to get inspiration. That's the word I was looking for. Inspiration from other farms, what people are doing, what kind of successes they're having, different resources that we could all pull from together, because collectively we all know more than anyone does individually. I'd heard a remark in the last couple of years that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go further, go together. And it really seemed like that was kind of the moment that we had.
Yeah. So, I think it was, I think the first thing is it's been a motivation. Okay, we got to get the farm cleaned up. We have people coming. So it's good motivation. Sometimes I can not be the most organized with my building. So there's that. But then there's just been this opportunity to share the farm. I feel it's a blessing that God has given me and my family, and to be able to share that with others has been part of the motivation. And through the years, we've been able to do that a little bit more than we probably would have otherwise.
We here at Harvest Hill Acres would love to thank the state of Minnesota for the grants that they provided for us through North Star Farm Tour to help us just keep going. COVID has been hard for us, but it started before COVID, and this grant really gave us some added incentive to better ourselves. And then as COVID struck, and we both lost our jobs because of COVID, it then became pretty much our front priority to make sure that our farm was successful and to support the animals here at Harvest Hill Acres. So I would like to thank you from the two-legged and the four-legged at Harvest Hill Acres. So I really wanted to thank the state of Minnesota for these grant funds. It enabled me to do things that I couldn't justify doing with my hard-earned immediate income. It enabled me to do things that helped me move into the future, to wow people about my offerings and also my wool and the and bring them here on site eventually to do some experiential things. And it's been really great.
I'm Westenberg. I'm a livelihoods geographer and an attorney specialized in food and agriculture law. I'm also the external evaluator for the North Star Farm Tour Sustainable Agriculture Demonstration Grant. I got involved in this grant at its inception in 2019. At the time, I was a first-year student at Vermont Law School getting my joint degree JD and Master's in Food and Agriculture Law and Policy. I'm incredibly grateful to the Vermont Law School Center for Agriculture and Food Systems for their support for my involvement in this project over the last few years and for donating the subscription that I needed to use Qualtrics software to run my longitudinal evaluation. In 2019, North Star Farm Tour received $25,000 from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, which it decided to distribute to its farmer cooperators in the form of 3 annual microgrants of $615 apiece that each farm received and invested in some way that was beneficial to their agritourism operation. At the same time, I ran a longitudinal evaluation of how farms invested those funds, how those investments affected their businesses, and tracked 3 topics. First, the profitability of the businesses. Second, the enjoyability and satisfaction that farmers felt from operating their agritourism operations. And third, how involvement in North Star Farm Tour as a learning community affected farmers' experiences and how they ran their agritourism operations over time. As you hear the findings of this project and hear from some of the technical cooperators and farmers who made it possible during this presentation, I want you to understand that there are 3 very intriguing new emerging issues in this field. The first is that there's an increasing understanding of the liability issues that agritourism operators face. They hold a lot of liability when they invite the public onto their farms, and there needs to be some development of new regulations or at least best practices that agritourism operators can adopt to protect the public and to protect the farmers themselves from these liability risks. The second is a better understanding of what barriers exist to accessing new markets, and especially in the era of COVID, what digital assets are necessary for farmers to expand their reach to new customer bases and to provide services to a wider swath of the public. The third is that there needs to be a better understanding of what opportunities exist for collective action. There are very few organizations across the country that represent the interests and needs of agritourism operators. And as state agencies begin to assess new regulatory options, and as other organizations start to try to provide support for those who operate agritourism businesses, organizations like North Star Farm Tour can and do play an interesting role and an important one in representing the needs and wants of agritourism operators across the state. These operations are incredibly diverse, and organizations can play a key role for helping unify the voice of those operators in conversations with different agencies. So I'm looking forward to sharing these results with you today and for you to start hearing from some of the technical cooperators and the farmers themselves as they tell you this story.
The next series of slides describes the grant in overview and introduces you first to the farmer cooperators, 13 in all, who founded North Star Farm Tour, were part of the first inaugural official tour, and were part of this grant project. We're indebted to each and every one of them. You're invited to stop your recording at any time that you want to read more of the materials that are on these next slides, because there's quite a bit of copy. First of all, let's start with the grant. $25,000 was divided 3 equal ways. $615 annually was given to the 13 farm cooperators in unrestricted block grants to invest in agritourism. We bought binders for $300 to help keep things organized. We had 3 $200 speaker stipends for our annual meetings. Ultimately, when 2 members decided to leave the project, that money was diverted to invest in our website, critical improvements. In 2019, we had a robust year. You'll hear a lot more about it in this presentation. The educational projects, new policies that ultimately transformed our organization, on business training, something important to our members. We began an alliance with the University of St. Thomas and their entrepreneurship program and hired a digital strategist to help us with our website. The block grants were distributed and evaluated, and we moved into 2020 very excited, but COVID-19 hit us hard. We canceled everything, like our 2020 tour and a very important business planning skills retreat at the University of St. Thomas that was to develop business plans for each of our farms and North Star Farm Tour. Meanwhile, our farmers each adapted to COVID-19 and this new world we were all living in. North Star Farm Tour went virtual. You'll hear more about some of the programs that we undertook, as well as some of the research that was undertaken with students from the University of St. Thomas. Our work with an international agritourism workshop was also canceled come fall. We spent block grant monies, we evaluated and moved into 2021 optimistic, but our concern for public health canceled the tour once again. Our farmers did continue to invest their block grants and adapt. Our educational projects moved forward. Our first ever collaboration with Ag in the Classroom from the Department of Agriculture, as well as another sock project involving blends of 6 different species of animals into socks. The research projects that we undertook were all aimed at social media and website improvements. Block grants were distributed for the final time, and our final evaluation, something we're very proud of. This presentation will cover 3 years. Please accept our apologies for not doing this live and in person, but we simply couldn't. This is our virtual substitute, a pattern of telling you about our North Star Farm Tour projects, the grant stories told in farmers' voices, and then the evaluation results told through the voice of Lauren Westenberg, who is the keeper of our history over these past 3 years.
"2019 was a really busy year for North Star Farm Tour. Our members started enthusiastically planning for our first official tour as an educational nonprofit organization. Our board continued active conversations with our 4 technical cooperators that signed on with us for the duration of the 3-year grant. We are indebted to these 4 technical cooperators who worked with us closely: Minnesota Growin', the Textile Center, the University of Minnesota Extension, and Minnesota Tourism Center at the University of Minnesota. Together with these technical cooperators, our partners, we created educational programs that our consumers or our visitors were very interested in. North Star Farm Tour actually began because agritourism is extremely popular. There's so many people that are interested in coming to the farm and learning about where their food comes from, where their clothing comes from, and other products. And they want to connect with the farmers and the animals. There are 2% of us farmers that in America that live on farms. 98% of people do not. And those people want to come to our farms and learn more about our way of life and our animals. So it is a huge, huge need for us to open up our farms. And it's a joy and a thrill to share with our customers and our consumers. So recently, when we were doing an interview with Brett Pauley at Pauley Alpacas, one of his visitors was in town, and she came back for a second visit, and their store wasn't even actually opened, but she came back, and she was very excited about the experience. And I'm going to let you listen to Nadine explain why she is so interested in agritourism.
It's like, I'm really happy that things like this exist, because I think, city people and farmers are kind of in their own world. And it's great when both can interact with one another, and talk to each other. And animals are kind of the central point of that, because no matter who you are, like most people really love animals, you know? And so I'm happy that these kind of things exist. I really think it's necessary. And most of my friends are all city people, like especially like just they move generally from one city to another. So I grew up in Miami, which is a big city in Florida, moved to Chicago, a big city in Illinois, moved to California, in Berkeley, big city in California, and now I'm in the capital of Rhode Island, so a city in Rhode Island. And we kind of just migrate there because we don't know what we're doing in a farm setting. You know, like I've talked to Miguel so many times after seeing all these alpaca farms about like, oh, I would love to open one, you know. We'd love to start one, you know, but we're terrified because we don't know what we're doing. And we come from, you know, we don't come from long family lines of farming who their parents know what to do and you learn from them when you're growing up. Like I don't. It was amazing to me just to like pull the egg fresh out of the chicken, because for me, I'm like, I buy them in a carton, right? I don't know anything else about where it comes from. And they were different colors, and I didn't understand why they were different colors because I'm used to them being white or brown, you know. Any experience for a city person to be able to interact with something that's like not a dog is really great.
Nadine's enthusiasm and comments are typical to our farm visitors. And to satisfy our consumers' needs, we decided to launch into educational projects. What better way to jump into learning projects than to showcase where their clothing comes from? The sock project and the farm to fashion project were our two educational projects for 2019. The sock project was born out of the idea that many of our farmers raise fiber-producing animals such as sheep, alpaca, llamas, Angora goats, rabbits, or yak. And the whole plan was to show how a product started on the farm and then ended up in the consumer's hands. So our farmers donated over 100 pounds of this raw fiber. From there, it was sent to Rachel Paca's mill in Hastings, Minnesota, where she blended it all together, made it into a really nice, luxurious fiber blend that she spun into really nice sock yarn. The sock yarn was then sent to Northland Woolen Mills in Nelson, Minnesota. There, they spun, or actually knit, I should say, they knit the yarn, the sock yarn, into these beautiful socks. Over 500 pairs were made from the 100 pounds of donated fiber. North Star Farm Tour was happy to be a part of a historical first, as Minnesota Growin' co-labeled these beautiful socks. And not only that, but they showcased them at the 2019 Minnesota State Fair. In September of 2019, these socks were then put on sale at our farm tour, and several hundreds were sold. We decided to really push our boundaries to see how far we could go with Minnesota-raised fiber. Fate intervened, and North Star Farm Tour was introduced to Tim and Tom Navarro, who are Minnesota-based designers and own the label Tim and Tom. During our conversation, it was decided that yes, North Star Farm Tour and Tim plus Tom should pursue the Farm to Fashion project. This project would again showcase Minnesota-raised fiber that would be turned into haute couture garments. 6 of our member farms donated fiber products. To turn the fiber into usable fabric, we turned to the Textile Center of Minnesota. Carl Reichert, the Textile Center's executive director, introduced us to Tracy Klum. It was Tracy who ultimately wove the beautiful fabric that was used for these garments, as well as felting the panels that were used to create these haute couture garments. Tim and Tom revealed the final garments at the Cocktails and Couture event that was held on one of our members' farms. This was to kick off Minnesota Black Fashion Week and also the 2019 Farm Tour.
You can do pretty much whatever you want. And the next one is modeled by Gina. Gina will come through. This one's more of a raw look at the fibers. So we have raw alpaca locks, the raw shearling and felted shearling. Again, we used the wool and the yak fibers weaved into textiles. So we wanted it to look presentable and be able to pair with the more sophisticated, refined look, but we wanted to show just a little bit more of a raw essence.
And something as a former farm kid myself, I know that rhythm of farm life and how exciting it is to see how wool really from the sheep becomes these amazing mittens that you can create, or the scarf, or weaving wool into textiles that can be sewn. I think North Star Farm Tours really has helped demonstrate how important that is, and how agriculture, no matter the scale, we often think of agriculture, I think today, as large corporate farms, but there are really these beautiful farms with organic approaches, and thinking about how we can create with fiber from a source material. So whether it is a sheep or a yak or flax from the field, that it can create something really quite beautiful and remarkable. When Textile Center was turning 25 years old in 2019, we were thinking through what kind of gala we would want to have to mark that history, and we landed on a fashion show with a banquet. And to be able to have Tim and Tom's beautiful garments as kind of the culminating feature of our fashion show was really exciting. And the fact that our director for artistic advancement, Carrie Klum, actually wove the material, the fabric, out of materials that came from the farms of North Star Farm Tour.
How thankful I am for an opportunity like this. It was such an amazing event, I guess is the best way to say, or a series of events. It was such a really heartwarming and inspirational experience all around. And I'm so happy that I got to make some really great friends out of it and also really great creations.
Yeah, I was kind of jumping on that same bandwagon. It's been an honor to be able to work with you guys and to be inspired by you guys. We got to actually be involved in just understanding how fiber is created, or how textiles are created. That was just mind blowing.
I think Tracy played one of the most important parts in this whole thing, is just being able to translate those ideas and the sketches and images of each piece into actual fabric was I mean, we wouldn't be in this position if she hadn't been there to help.
Yeah, and I definitely think it was really hard for us to wrap our heads around the fact that somehow these lumps of material, of fiber, organic, magic was gonna be become something that we could actually manipulate and form. And I just remember walking away from some of our meetings and just being this is a lot of pressure. I didn't feel it from you or from any of the other farmers, but it was just the idea to like realize this vision, like we could like, there's a 50% chance like we could totally miss the mark, you know, to be able to take that journey of just turning and understanding like how much labor alone, how much it took just to get a yard of fabric was something that I think like gave me as a designer, it made me really respect the materials that I was working with. And to this day, it gives me a greater appreciation of just like what I'm wearing. Granted, I'm not wearing like something that we created together, but I wear wool, I wear cotton, you know, I wear textiles, and just to think like just the process of getting here, just to make myself feel like I'm ready to take on the day, how much that work takes, you know, from somebody else, farmers, you know, laborers, just is amazing.
Wow, 2019 is amazing. We are on a roll. We've got 2 top-notch education programs going, the SOC project and the Farm to Fashion project. We are on a roll.
Except with that amazing roll came us rolling into the dinner that was hosted by the Department of Health, by the Department of Agriculture, and the Upper Midwest Agricultural Safety and Health Center. It's called Fun on the Farm, and it was a reminder of the incredible obligation that we have as agritourism hosts to keep the public safe. We went there almost by accident. It was available. It was a free dinner. We thought, let's take some members with us. And in fact, 7 of us went to that dinner.
Yeah, agritourism, fun on the farm.
But we got an education, and it was a critical one, and really put the brakes on our enthusiasm to rush ahead with planning until we figured out how to implement those strategies. Rather than us tell you, we've invited Carrie Klum, who's the senior epidemiologist from the Minnesota Department of Public Health, to join us. Sit back, pay attention, because she's got a shorter version to tell you, but it's important for anybody to know who's going to host the public.
So my name is Carrie Klum. I'm an infectious disease epidemiologist at the Minnesota Department of Health. I work in our zoonotic diseases unit. I have been there, 14 years at the state now, 10 of those in the zoonotic diseases unit. And I wear several hats in the unit. So one of my jobs is to do animal rabies surveillance for the state, but the other 2 main jobs that I have are being the principal investigator on a grant with CDC to try to prevent influenza and other zoonotic illnesses in kids in youth agriculture organizations. So we've been working with 4-H to develop educational outreach activities for that population. And then my other main focus is being the project coordinator for a surveillance project the health department does looking at zoonotic diseases in farmers and their families and farm workers, and then also people who go to either visit farms or to engage in agritourism on farms or petting zoos, fairs, things like that. So we've been collecting those data for a decade now. And part of my role in the zoonotic unit is also to investigate outbreaks. So when we have outbreaks of illnesses that have an animal origin, so things like E. coli or Salmonella, for example, we will do an investigation and try to figure out if we can actually find the source of those germs. And so where all of this started in terms of outreach around agritourism is that we were investigating these outbreaks, and for E. coli outbreaks in particular, if children get really sick and end up in the hospital with a complication that can result from E. coli O157H7, which is called hemolytic uremic syndrome, they can have their kidneys stop functioning and they're incredibly ill, very large hospital bills. And what we're seeing is that if this happened with an outbreak, the farms were almost universally sued by the parents of the children who got sick. And we would have to provide our reports. I was subpoenaed a couple times for lawsuits. And so we started to think like there's got to be a better way than just investigating the outbreak once we already have a problem and people are already sick. And we were seeing, farms not being able to survive having an outbreak financially. We know of one of the outbreaks I investigated where it actually went to a jury trial, which is quite unusual. It wasn't settled out of court, and the jury awarded the family like over $6 million. So there's no way that farm could still exist. And so the idea to do workshops and outreach came from that work at the health department. And how can we get information to the operators and their employees about the national best practices for safe public animal contact venues? Like, how do you mitigate the risk as much as you can when you have people interacting with animals? We know that animals naturally have some of these germs and they don't necessarily make the animal sick, but they make people sick. And so it's an inherent risk that exists for people living and working with animals and also people visiting and interacting with animals. And there is no professional organization for agritourism in the state of Minnesota. And so we felt like there was a huge gap for people engaging in agritourism to have the best information available to them so they knew how to mitigate risk on their farm and how to reduce their liability on their farm while still being profitable. And so that's where the agritourism workshops came from. It's also very confusing in Minnesota to figure out who should license you if you're going to be selling food products. And so we also co-hosted these workshops with the Department of Agriculture and the Minnesota Department of Health's Environmental Health Division, because they both cover licensing depending on the types of food you're selling. So we designed these with the idea of, at least from the public health perspective, can we get all the relevant information they would need, an operator would need in one place. And so that's how they were created. And we took the National Association of State Public Health Veterinarians compendium, which is a group of national experts that meet every few years to update what these best practices are based on the available scientific data. We took that and we distilled it down into a checklist, and we distilled it into a presentation that we provide at these workshops. And then we also created the online training program that's free and voluntary, but then you get a certification that you have completed this training. And that's the Safer Faces program. So the North Star Farm Tour had both Melody and Wendy came to one of my workshops, and I had done several of them before. And I always say at the end of them that if you would like more information or you want a consultant, I'm the cheapest consultant you'll ever get because I'm free, because my job is to work for you. I am a public servant working for people of Minnesota. And they were the first people to really take me up on that offer. So both Melody and Wendy reached out to me and, wanted more information about how to make changes on their farms and to the co-op to really think about how to mitigate risk and still provide visitors with a really great experience. And so it's kind of just gone from there, where we've been great partners. I've been so thankful to have Melody and Wendy be champions for us, champions of public health, quite frankly. So they have come to several other workshops or conferences where I've presented the scientific, technical things about the best practices. And then they've been able to come in and say, okay, so now how do you actually do this on your farm? Like, what's the real world application of this? And like, how did we feel after we first learned these things ourselves? And then how did we move forward from that, like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do now that we have this information? And also been great partners with translations. We have a hand washing poster that we had created, and we just there's always a problem within the health department with time and money, right? Like there's so much work to do and not enough people to do it all and not enough money to do it all. So we had the hand washing posters in English, and we wanted them to be in other languages, but hadn't been able to make that happen. And the North Star Farm Tour did make that happen. And so they took our poster and translated it and put it all on a QR code so people can easily access all of that, all of those different versions. And that's also on the UMash website. And the health department is part of the Upper Midwest Agricultural Safety and Health Center, or UMash Center. And I'm sure I'm forgetting other things. Oh, the other major thing is the hand washing station. So once the North Star Farm Tour folks realized, oh my gosh, we need hand washing at every farm, you guys came up with schematics and like blueprints of how to build one and instructions on how to do it, and put those on your website for free, and then also put that on the UMash website, which is a wonderful resource. And you also brought the hand washing station to several other, events or conferences where we co-presented. So for us, it's been really helpful from a health department perspective to have a champion that's in the field, right? So like the people who we are trying to get this information out to and maybe don't have a relationship with the health department or don't have previous relationships with government agencies. And Melody and Wendy's sort of steadfast partnership with us and believing in the science and public health really helps, I think, for people who maybe are hesitant or might not have a relationship with the health department, to say like, okay, maybe, maybe this is something we can trust and we should listen to. And for us, that's just invaluable to have champions on the ground, helping get our message out to our target population that we're trying to help.
As you can imagine, this was a transformational moment for us.
Absolutely. Carrie took us to school.
She did. And there were changes. First of all, we changed our mission. We put safety first, necessarily. So our mission now is connecting people with agriculture through safe, fun, educational agritourism. This starts to answer the question of how we can professionalize agritourism. She took us there. We do that when we comply with regulations, federal and state, and we anticipate how to do it safely. The second thing we did was modify our policies. Most notably, now it is a requirement that all our members are Safer Faces certified.
And in 2019, 100% of our members became certified through the Safer Faces program.
It was quite an accomplishment.
Absolutely.
The other thing we looked at very hard was the requirement of the State Board, Arts Board, had come up in 2018 and 19 with a really profound recommendation that all organizations that provide funding, which we do, comply with their new expectation of diversity and inclusivity. We adopted that policy wholesale within our organization, and we did so, as I remember, Melody, we had realized that when mothers are yelling, "Don't touch the electric fence," it doesn't matter what language they're doing it in. We know what they're trying to say.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. And farming is a cultural bind from the world over. So, our gatherings were, really ecumenical places where people could come and be comfortable and talk about their own cultural experiences with all kinds of farming animals and farming practices. So it was natural for us to do that. But one of the things we realized is when the state said, we have to help everyone stay safe, this is the state hand washing poster, it's all in English. So as Carrie mentioned, we did translate. So this QR scan code that's right over here links directly to downloadable languages of this poster. And we saw quite a number of people, even in 2018, using that.
Absolutely. Yeah, you take your smartphone and hit the QR scan, and boom, it links to the North Star Farm Tours website, and there's 21 different languages that are translated there.
It's our gift back, pay forward for everything we received. We put it on the UMash website, and certainly hope that all of you can take advantage of that. along with some other resources in our toolkit that you'll be hearing about at the end of this show.
Hey, wait a minute. I'm really enjoying my time on the farm. I don't think I can wait to the end of the presentation. I need that toolkit now.
Oh, yes, you do. Please go wash your hands. What a good decision. Meanwhile, we will send everybody a quick glimpse into the North Star Farm Tour Farm Safety Toolkit. There are 3 resources coming in this next section for you to take a quick look at. You can find them all at 2 websites, either northstarfarmtour.org or umash.umn.edu. Now let's take a quick look at our DIY video tutorial, and then the blueprint and the hand washing posters that you can download.
We realized we needed to create practical bridges between what we learned that night about how animals, any animal, can make human beings sick, and the fact that we love bringing hundreds, if not thousands of people to our farms each year for activities, tours and classes.
Farm dinners, yak camps, farm camps.
So what do frugal farmers do, Melody?
Well, we are frugal farmers, and we use what we had around. We had an over-the-fence feeder, a 5-gallon bucket, 2x4s, 5 gallons in, 5 gallons out. Nice and sanitary, and even a weatherproof bucket for all the extra supplies for hand washing. So let's put Sweet Pea down and demonstrate how this works.
It is hard to believe that something as sweet as Sweet Pea is actually capable of making people sick, but off she goes, and I'm gonna wash my hands.
All right, we've got paper towels and soap. For about $250 or less, one can build this do-it-yourself handstand. And like I said, we have the fence feeder, the 5-gallon bucket, 2x4s. Culligan containers here have 5 gallons of fresh water in, fresh water out.
We're very indebted to the agencies that made this happen: the Department of Health, Minnesota Department of Agriculture, Minnesota Grown, the Upper Midwest Agricultural Health and Safety Center at the University of Minnesota, and last but not least, our community partner, Mayo Clinic Health Systems. They've made it free for you to download these plans, and today we're going to show you how to build it.
Yeah, let's go meet Rich. Figure
Good
out
idea.
how to build this. Hey, Rich.
Melody.
So today we are in Windswept Hills Studio, and I'm so excited because we get to learn how to do the DIY handstand for North Star Farm Tour.
Fantastic.
And this is a key point for our Farm Safety Health Initiative, was the handstand.
And you haven't ever built one before.
I've never built one, so I'm really excited today to learn how to do this.
Well, we'll see if we can teach you how to do that.
All right.
Rich, thanks for agreeing to do this. Rich West is a professional contractor licensed in the state of Minnesota with Rich West Remodeling. Done some wonderful work with me over the years, not the least of which was helping design and build this hand washing station. You can follow along with Melody. Go online. You can download this wonderful plan that was developed by designer Jonathan Chan of Toronto, Ontario, as a gift to us. Right there, if you go to northstarfarmtour.org, it's free to you thanks to our sponsors we mentioned earlier. And Rich, I'm going to flip to page 3. I know you're going to go through this whole thing with everyone, but I believe this is the parts list, and that's always where you like to start.
The Minnesota hand washing poster is available in the following languages, and we welcome your suggestions for some others that we might translate in the near future. You can find them at northstarfarmtour.org or visit the Upper Midwest Agricultural Safety and Health Center for many, many more resources at umash.umn.edu.
September 2019, North Star Farm Tour sponsored its first tour as an official 501c3 nonprofit organization.
And what a smashing success.
Oh, it was. 21 of our member farms opened up their farms for over 5,000 visitors.
It was stunning. It was absolutely stunning. You know, they came from all over. We had people from 7 different countries, including 2 provinces of Canada, 5 states, 87 cities in Minnesota, which is, you know, like about 10%.
I mean, it was a shock to look at those evaluations.
People loved it. And we found out from their tour drawing slips that they wanted more. They
More
wanted
of everything.
Yeah, more tours, more farm stays, more classes, more camps.
More socks.
More socks. So the fall of 2019, we had a lot to evaluate. I'm good.
In the fall of 2019, I conducted the first baseline survey that served as the foundation of my longitudinal evaluation of this grant. It was focused on getting to understand who the participants in the study were, what their biggest barriers were to making profits or enjoying their farm businesses, and then looking at how they chose to invest their microgrants in this first year. What I found was that there is a wide diversity of participants in this study. Farms range in farm size, the types of activities they're engaged in, how dedicated they are to the commercialization of those activities, and how reliant they are on farm income in terms of their overall household income. Farms ranged in size from one participant who doesn't actually own a farm at all and host their flock of sheep at other people's farms to provide grazing services, to one farm that has over 80 acres that they manage to manage all of their farm activities. The activities that they engage in are also incredibly diverse. People raise livestock. They have sheep, llamas, alpacas, yak, Angora rabbits, chickens, ducks. They grow different types of crops, everything from your traditional row crops to mixed vegetables to agroforestry and kind of a mixed succession fruit and nut production system. They all are engaged in some kind of agritourism on a small or large scale, either providing small scale farm tours. All of them were participating in the 2019 farm tour through North Star Farm Tour, or hosting large special events like weddings or youth farm camps to do youth agricultural education. And when I asked farms whether they identified their business as being primarily commercial in nature or primarily personal in nature, or a combination of the two, in 2019, only 3 of the study participants said that they felt that their farm was primarily commercial in nature. So most farms thought that it was not their main source of income. There were a small number that felt that their farms were truly working farms that they were reliant on for a significant portion of their household income, but many viewed it as a side activity or a hobby. And when I asked them to reflect on what the biggest barriers they felt that existed for their profitability or the enjoyability of their businesses, 60% of them said that they felt that it was a lack of time. They had significant pressures of off-farm involvements, either employment or kids that have activities that are off the farm, or involvement in other organizations that kept them from spending as much time as they really wanted to, improving their farm, taking care of day-to-day management activities, or spending time focusing on expanding the business and profit-making piece of their farm. The second largest barrier that people cited was a lack of business development and marketing strategy. They felt like they didn't have the tools that they needed to know how to truly brand themselves, how to connect to new consumers, how to get their names out there, and how to make sure that they had a truly professional business approach. Third, they said that there were financial constraints to making new investments in their farms. And fourth, they felt that many felt there was a need to improve their facilities so that they could safely host the public, or be able to host the types of activities that they really wanted to be offering to their customers. You can see some intention to address these barriers in the way that farmers chose to invest their funds in 2019. There were 4 categories of investments that were tied in the number of farms that chose to invest in them. Some chose to buy new equipment, either to help with managing their livestock or with processing fibers in new ways. There were investments in infrastructure to help make the day-to-day operations of the farm more efficient, or to allow for improved spaces for hosting classes or hosting the public during farm visits. Some farms were speculatively investing in new product development. They had things that they had been hoping to try in out with their fibers that they never felt like they could accept the risk of investing in, and they used the block grants to help spur on new business and marketing strategies by doing some research and development on new products that they could make. And the fourth was they invested in agritourism hosting and making sure that their farm was well prepared to host the public, to create educational materials or signage, or get the help that they needed to be able to help people get shepherded around their farms. So heading into the end of 2019 and 2020, the biggest recommendation that came out of this was for improved supports for farmers that were looking to develop their businesses more intentionally.
My name is Jack Workman. I'm currently a senior at the University of St. Thomas studying entrepreneurship, and I am currently the VP of membership for the Enactus Club, which is an on-campus entrepreneurship club. So Enactus mainly focuses on local nonprofits that aim to better the community in some way. And North Star Farm Tour was a great opportunity to help a group really achieve that mission through educating the public about agriculture and agritourism practices. My relationship with North Star Farm Tour, I'm currently the chairman of the development committee. And that came about through the partnership between Enactus and North Star Farm Tour. At the beginning of the partnership between Enactus and North Star Farm Tours, we decided it would be a good idea to actually go out to one of the farms and see what the group was all about. We decided to go to the farm of the vice president, Wendy Westenberg, which was mainly a sheep farm. And we got to see all the different facilities and how the farm was run, and also how a little bit into how the agritourism practices were kind of played out. At the end of the night, we all sat down for a nice farm-raised dinner, which was amazing. And one of my fellow club members, actually the president of Enactus, asked the question, so what exactly is fiber? And fiber at the time was the main mission focus of North Star Farm Tours. And right then and there, we kind of figured out that fiber being the main mission statement point was not ideal, and we needed to move into something a little bit more broad and something that the public would understand a bit more deeply. From my entrepreneurship studies at the University of St. Thomas, one of the biggest points is value creation and value extraction, specifically for consumers. Entrepreneurs nowadays are becoming a lot more focused on the consumer and solving the problems of the consumer. The current mission that North Star Farm Tours has today truly opens a lot of doors into helping solve the problems that the community has, specifically anything with agriculture concerns, or just having a fun day or fun experience at one of these farms. Yeah, so the retreat that we had planned was mainly centered around skill building for the farm members. In the morning, we had planned to have a few faculty and staff members come in and speak with each of the farm members about entrepreneurial practices, innovation, and those two items stated before, value creation and extraction. At the end of the day, we were planning to pair each of the farm members with an Enactus member and have them work their way through some sort of business plan and help them get started. Through the process of trying to put this retreat together, we also determined that it would probably be, it would bring a lot of value to the organization if there was an overlying business plan for North Star Farm Tour as an organization separate from the farmers. Unfortunately, because of weather and just events that were out of our control, we had to postpone the retreat. We planned to have it postponed into March, but then unfortunately that was 2020 and COVID had shut down the campus and almost the entire country and world. So that retreat never happened, unfortunately. When COVID hit in 2020, obviously the world was really shaken up, and the future of North Star Farm Tours was really uncertain. But because of the mission and the people who were involved in the organization, I was really wanted to stay involved and find any way to help. In the fall of 2020, I decided it would be a good idea to develop a needs assessment and develop a survey for each of the farm members to help better understand what the farmers were looking for out of the organization. Again, looking at it through the lens as North Star Farm Tour is the producer and the farm members were the consumers, trying to create and extract value for each and every one of them so they could find enjoyment, and in turn, consumers would do so as well. So even though there was no retreat pertaining to developing business plans for each of the farm members involved in North Star Farm Tours, there was another retreat that was specifically focused on social media outreach and digital development to help members reach the consumers that they wanted to reach. The reason for this retreat was because all of us as an Enactus group realized that the social media presence and overall just online presence of North Star Farm Tours was really lacking. The website hadn't been updated in a very long time. It was very clunky, and that was actually one of the main points that people complained about at the farm tour, was that the website just wasn't up to par with everybody else's, and it was really hard to navigate through. So we decided to use the time that would have been spent to develop the retreat and build out the business plans for each of the farm members, and instead decided to host a retreat that specifically focused on web development.
Basically, what we did was we took a website that was maybe more difficult to keep up to date. We were really reliant on a volunteer for that. And we put you into a platform that's going to give you a really solid foundation to go wherever it is this organization wants to go. So everything from you're in a platform now that's easier to get found online, that's infinitely expandable. And we've been able to sit down and strategize on what that website should look like, what needs to go into it, and where you want to go in the future. So for example, we are going to be, we've taken the website, we have some basic information up there, the contact forms, the farm pages, and now we're going to add in the ability for farmers to be able to put their events out there and sell tickets and get their information in front of more people, which is going to help not only the organization continue to grow, but each of the individual farms. And then there are plans out there in place and things we've talked about, including a big e-commerce marketplace, which is a huge step for this organization. So no matter what you want to do, whether it's going for this marketplace or should some other great idea come out of it, we have the ability because of this foundation we put in place, and it really is up to your heart's desire.
Welcome to Frosty Acres alpacas. Let me introduce you to some of my herd.
Hi, boys. What you doing? You enjoying this nice weather? Huh? Sven, don't be stuck up. Charlie, say hi. Say hi, Willie.
In fall of 2020, I repeated the survey that I'd conducted in fall of 2019, and I added a new section asking farms about how they were impacted by COVID-19. I found that farms were just as diverse in their farm size and farm structure as they were in 2019, but more of the farms identified as being primarily commercial in the reason why they were operating their farms. In 2019, if you'll remember, only 3 farms, when asked whether their businesses were primarily commercial or primarily personal in nature, said that they were primarily commercial. While in fall of 2020, 6 farms said that they were primarily commercial in nature. This was reflected in the survey in farms explaining that either they had lost off-farm employment, or they'd had reduced hours, or there were other financial constraints that came from during the pandemic that required them to be more reliant on their farm income for their overall household income. But also farmers were spending a lot more time on their farms in 2020 than they were in 2019, and they weren't having to host the public nearly as much. As governments were asking people to isolate, as they were shutting down, as there were quarantines put in place, farmers were really staying home and spending time either with their animals or dedicating to the management of their farm or the expansion and marketing of their business strategies. This was reflected in, surprisingly, the farms reporting increased profitability compared to 2019 and significantly increased enjoyability of running their farms compared to 2019. They were saying that the sources of their satisfaction for running their farms came from spending time connecting with the animals, building a relationship with the land, enjoying moments of solitude to be connecting with nature. And these are all things that they got to do a lot more of during 2020 and this pandemic than they had previously, and they didn't have the distractions of needing to host the public at the same time. I also asked farmers to identify, again, barriers to profitability and enjoyability. And it was interesting to see how the list had changed between 2019 and 2020. I think in part because more farms were dedicated to commercializing their activities. In 2020, the number one barrier that they cited was difficulty in reaching economies of scale. Farms said that they wanted to produce more product, but they couldn't because they'd reached the limit of how many animals they could have on their land or how much crop production they could do on their land. They also said that they'd reached the limit of their production capacity for new products in terms of fiber processing or store size or ability to access their customer base. Second, farms said, just as they had in 2019, that a major barrier was a lack of time. Even with government shutdowns and quarantines, they still felt like they were torn in multiple directions for how to spend their time, and it kept them from dedicating quite as much time as they would like to developing the business side of their farm or to have sufficient time to dedicate to managing the farm itself. The third barrier, which was cited by, I think mostly by that contingent of farms that said they're primarily personal in nature and not commercial, is they simply said that they had no interest in expanding their business or being more profitable. They cited this as a barrier, even though it's a basic characteristic of how and why they run their businesses. And I think it's an important characteristic because it shows a difference in how or why different farms are engaged in agritourism in the first place. Some are really trying to turn it into a business and professionalize the operation of it because they view it as a profit-making opportunity. And then others are viewing it more as a public service and getting more involved in it as a hobby or as a way of giving back to their community. And the fourth barrier that got cited was concerns about marketing. And the concerns about marketing that were cited in 2020 were different than those that were cited in 2019. In 2019, farmers were saying that the issues they found with marketing was that they lacked business development or a business strategy or a business plan. They really didn't feel like they had a handle on how to feel like a legitimate business or to develop in an intentional way. Farmers in 2020 said that they felt like they had more tools that they'd gained through conversations with the University of St. Thomas and Actis Club, or looking at business planning and entrepreneurship training. But they were much more focused in 2020 on concerns about digital marketing, that there's a new pressure to have a digital presence, either through a personal website or a Facebook page or some kind of social media presence, and felt like they didn't have the resources or time to dedicate to developing on those platforms, or they didn't have the know-how to know how to do it correctly and make it a worthwhile investment. So I also asked kind of how farms had invested their block grant funds. And this picture of investments was different than it was in 2019. In 2019, most of the funds had gone towards equipment and infrastructure and agritourism hosting prep. And in 2020, there was a larger number of farms that ended up using the block grant funds just to cover basic farm expenses and feed and grain costs for their livestock. And some were expressing huge gratitude for the presence of these block grant funds just to stay afloat throughout the pandemic. There were other farms that took advantage of not having the public on their farm for a year to make some major infrastructural improvements, or to get equipment to start doing their own fiber processing, or to expand their capacity for fiber processing. A lot of farms in 2019 shipped out their raw fiber material to a processor and then got the finished products back to sell to the public. But this processing is quite expensive and it takes quite a while. So during the supply chain slowdowns or the shipping slowdowns of 2020, farms were deciding to try to start processing the fibers by themselves, by getting the equipment that they needed to be a bit more self-sufficient in providing the products that they needed to the public, and hopefully to expand their educational capacity by showing how fiber processing is done on site. Some farms were also focused on flock improvement, and there were 2 farms that were also investing in agritourism hosting, but specifically on improvements to their hosting that allowed them to do it in a socially distanced and COVID-safe way.
Yeah, those grant funds were really game changers. Those really helped, like I said earlier, kind of get us over the hump and really get us refocused, reestablished. The first year, we actually invested in 4 fainting goats that in our particular area, we have a lot of invasive species on our property. We have a lot of buckthorn, we have poison ivy, we have wild parsnip. And when we got into it, we just thought, hey, these guys can eat those things that I don't want to pull out of the ground anymore by hand. And they turned out to be a little bit of an attraction unto themselves. Second year is actually what I've got right behind me here. We were primarily a seasonal operation where we could be open in the spring and in the summer, and then a little bit into the fall. But when the snow came down and blocked our paths, we pretty much had to shut down the gift shop, which was in our barn, and closed up for the winter, and basically had 0 revenue generating potential over those winter months. We then spent those grant funds in this hooking up this potbelly stove back here, which allowed us to have our first ever winter open houses. And we had about 5 or 6 of them between January and February of 2021, and they were very well attended. We had kind of stumbled into what we think might actually be the prime season for a warm weather fiber farm that sells socks, scarves, hats, mittens, gloves. But that stove has been a game changer. It keeps us about 70 to 80 degrees when it's 5 below outside. So it's a nice place. We went from 0 revenue generating over those months to they were probably our 2 most profitable months of the entire season, or of the entire year, really. Honestly, the momentum started after year 1. when we found that the addition of the goats were not only improving our property but also more entertaining and engaging to visitors. Then it was just like that kind of freed us up to have more ideas. Like, well, now what should we do? That led into the, well, if we could be open more often, then we can address some of the requests we're having for tours in the winter months. So the presence of the grant funds actually made that a possibility for us. And then so that's and then after that kind of frees up and took a little more off of our shoulders to then think, okay, now what? Now where do we want to take things? What's the next thing we want to do to involve the experience of visiting our farm? We were dragging hoses from inside the house where it was warm to hook them up to the spigot, to drag them up to fill up stock tanks, and then quick roll it back up and get it inside before it freezes again. And when you discover that animals need water at 10 o'clock at night, that's not fun. So the block grant funds to fund that new two-sided Ritchie watering system is, every day my wife and I come in from doing chores and it's like, it's so nice to not have to do the water tonight. So that is, again, that was something that was taking a lot of time. It didn't seem like it was a huge burden, but once that burden was lifted, now it's like, now we have some more time, mental energy to think about, and that may, now we can get a jump start on processing the fiber for next year's batch of yarn, things like that. It really helped alleviate, or is helping alleviate, some of the stress in day-to-day operations.
Well, here at Harvest Hill Acres, we are in pretty much south central Minnesota. We are purely a fiber farm. We have not dove into meat yet, so we are currently at 80 CBM Rombadale sheep. We produce fiber, as you can see behind me, there's a lot of it. We also do breeding stock. Our breed of sheep is a minor breed through the Livestock Conservancy, and so we also sell breeding stock through that. My involvement with agritourism goes way back to probably 2012, 2013, where fiber farm tours were new and kind of a new thing on the block. And so it's evolved through a couple evolutions to what is now the North Star Farm Tour. I always have had an interest, even though I'm a city girl, in agriculture, as well as my degree is in animal science. Also have a background in wildlife. So the thing, being a city girl in Chicago, always wanting to grow up and have your own farm, it took me until I was 50 something to finally have it happen. But I'm excited for that opportunity, and we do various things. We do farm tours, we do field trips, we do different kind of fiber events in person or online. Done a lot of online sales to promote agritourism and our farm and our sheep and our wool products. So this little section right here, some of the newer products. So this is felted. Everything here is felted. It's all wool from our farm. It's done on a felting machine. So we have wool inserts for shoes or boots, 4 different sizes. I think the sizes are down here. And so they go inside your boot. You can trim them to the insole of your shoe or your boot, so they have some extra width to them. I also, if you're a quilter or a sewer, I have 2 different sizes of quilt pressing mats. Again, 100% wool from our farm. With our grants, we've done various things here at Harvest Hill Acres. We've done some signage. This is one of them that I use out in front of our farm. I've also used it at various fiber venues, and it helps kind of identify through a marketing source. That's our logo. I also bought a logoed tablecloth that I also use for different farm events, as well as when I'm out doing fiber festivals or fiber sales. I've also, because we are a minor breed, I have bought a kind of a database program that helps me figure out the genetic relatedness to each animal that we have here. So it kind of helps me figure out who I can breed to who, and when it's basically time to infuse some new bloodlines to our flock, which has been extremely helpful. I've wanted to do that for a couple years, and because of the grant, I was able to do that. It also, we have a knit night event once a month here at the farm. So I've used some of the money for that to print the flyers for the outlay of it, things like that. And I think those can go out either digitally, or I hang them up in locations around our farm to let everybody know. So it's promoting agriculture when people are here knitting or crocheting or whatever they bring. They also get a taste of our farm and get to visit the animals.
In one of my previous lives was a college instructor, and I really enjoy teaching people fun stuff. So I taught horticulture and how to propagate plants. Well, I'm interested now in teaching people how to process their own wool so that they can be self-sufficient if they choose to be so. And this was part of that whole process, was to be able to take them from a raw fleece, wash it, and then put it into this machine and have it. This is a carding machine. There are 2 drums that roll, and then they actually pull the fiber straight. And so this whole thing is aligned so that you get fiber that is straightened out and more or less going to be wrapped around the drum. And it makes a very nice, evenly thick and evenly spaced and nicely oriented bat of fibers. And then what you do, so it ends up looking like something like this when you're done. And this one is from one of my thin crosses, and I'm going to be using it to wet felt some slippers. But anyway, that's a whole nother process. But it has a number of different options. You can use it for something like a bat for wet felting, or you can use it for spinning. You can pull it off in a strand, but it is very helpful to have those fibers to be oriented parallel to each other, so that then when you twist them, you spin them, you're actually forming that nice strong thread. So you take this and you line it up in here. And over on this side, there's a hand crank. And you put it in there just far enough that it gets caught on those needles. It goes through, and you can see it coming out the top, and it stretched around this larger, and you just keep adding more and more and more. You try not to get too much at any one time, otherwise it chokes. I don't know if you can see, but the color is changing from a peach color up here to white as the wool is accumulating on the carder. It's not the largest one out there, but it fits my needs. You can also use this if you've got dyed wool to do different color patterns if you want to have a combination wool spun. So The grants have been kind of fun in helping what I see as the agritourism portion of my enterprise here. Most of my stuff is sort of done here in isolation, but the agritourism is where I am interacting with the public and teaching them about agriculture. And the first year I got this machine, which is going to help me do some teaching in the future, hopefully. The second year was a partial purchase of the circular sock machine. And that has twofolds. Number one, it helps me to showcase this lovely wool blend that I have bred. And it also is an eye-catcher item for when I'm at events. For instance, at Shepherd's Harvest or at a tour, I can set up my sock machine and people are drawn in by the sound, and it's really very lovely clicky click where it is creating a sock tube before your very eyes. So it's engaging and hopefully will, number one, bring people into my booth. Number two, help me make use of my time as I'm sitting there doing maybe not much else besides talking. And the third year was the one where I actually spent part of the money to process some of this wool. So I've been breeding these sheep to get a non-felting sock wool that's comfortable next to the foot, and it's long enough to be spun into yarn, and it does not felt in the wash. There's a lot of upfront expense to making yarn, in addition to the time that you really don't get compensated for until the very end. There is the washing, the carding, the spinning, the combining with the nylon to make them durable. All of that needs to be done up front, and it can be a bit of a burden. And I must say that having those grant funds was really, really helpful. All of this is about advertising the value of my flock and the value of my genetics. And it did come to fruition. I was able to sell 28 skeins of my sock yarn to Blue Hair Knittery in Decorah. And they were saying that they had a demand for local products, especially from the parents of the Luther College students who come in and want something from the region. They might only be able to visit their kids. They have quite a broad spectrum of geography that they draw from. And so when the parents come, they want something from this region. And so I was able to be the one who had the yarn that they're featuring as some of their locally produced farm goods. And I think it's a win-win situation because I'm getting reports back from another woman friend who has already knit 2 pairs of socks, and she said that it's easy to work with and they are very comfortable, not the least bit scratchy, and she's just loving it. So being able to do that first ever batch of sock yarn from my very own homebred Finn baby doll crosses was just a real treat, a real gift. So thank you so much, State of Minnesota. The second part of that was I purchased a trail cam to help me monitor deer. They are impacting the growth of my hazelnuts and my elderberries, and well, they're also up around in the orchard as well. But there is a program where I can, if I show proof of their damage to my crops, I can get a license to shoot. And also perhaps some restitution for the damage done.
So when I first decided to get alpacas, after I bought my first 2 alpacas, I had a friend teach me how to knit. The first year, all I knit was garter stitch scarves. Everyone in my family got one. And which is the most basic thing you can knit. I eventually learned more stitches and started knitting mittens and hats and fancy shawls and learned how to cable. And then moved on to sweaters. Sweaters were very intimidating for me because there's so many different parts. You have to do shaping, but eventually it took me, I think, 8 years after I learned how to knit my first sweater. And now I've knit 5 of them. This is, I think, number 4. So then after I became pretty proficient at knitting and moved back to Minnesota, I started teaching knitting classes at a local shop. And starting, like I said, with the basics, with just learning how to knit and then advancing for learning other stitches. And that's something I tell people when I go to my different events about, you know, where I started, how far I've come, because everybody thinks they can't learn to knit, which if you want to, you can. It just takes a little practice. It takes persistence. I'm not a particularly fast knitter, but I am very persistent. And I think that is what has made my farm successful, is I am persistent. I don't give up, even though there are times I want to, and knitting is a lot. Knitting is definitely a metaphor for life, because you get snags, you mess up, you have to start over. But if you keep going, you are rewarded with something beautiful. And now I make sure to wear this whenever it's cool enough to wear it to an event. And it's something I'm really proud of, that I'll have this for many years to come from my animal, the first one that I've loved or, you know, cared for his whole life. Yeah, so the first year I used the money for our first sock project. And then for, like I said, this yarn collaboration. 2020 and 2021 have been a bit of a challenge. So I've used it for things that I needed on the farm, mostly for hay. Which has been a lifesaver, because I haven't, until November, I hadn't had an in-person event in 2 years. And that's where I make most of the money for the operations for my farm, is at in-person events. Selling the yarn, selling mittens that I make, selling the socks from the sock project from North Star Farm Tour. That's where the majority of my income comes from.
The grant is, you know, being on a farm, it seems like there's always 1,000 different things that I could invest money in. And I think my best description is to say that the grant has allowed me maybe to stray into other areas to spend money that I might not have before, or maybe allows me to spend a little bit more. I think the first grant, I used part of that money to help clear out some old feed bunks that were basically blocking up a section of the farm. And so it gives me access to a barn now where I keep my bobcat. And so when it comes time to clear the snow, like this morning, I have a pretty good runway to get started and get everything started. And the next, I think, was feeders. And it allowed me to invest a little bit extra in some feeders that I built, and you can kind of see them here in the background. This has become my lambing barn. So in the spring, it'll look completely different. I'll have lambing jugs in here. I have cameras set up now so that I can monitor lambing activity. And then this most recent year, as I mentioned, the Wensleydales are part of a breed up program. The last time there was any imported semen, I think, was probably 20 years ago, somewhere around that time frame. Importation of semen from the UK is open again. And so then this spring, there was, I think it's Heritage Sheep Reproduction Company in Iowa, was doing a big importation of UK sheep breeds, and Wensleydale was one of those breeds. And so just having that extra money allowed me to participate in this importation of semen. And the 4 Wensleydale ewes here in the background were all AI'd a week ago today. So fingers crossed, and hoping that we'll get some lambs out of that. when I want to have people come out, I want them to be able to actually touch the animals and, watch them being sheared. Maybe experience what it's like to try to spin fiber. So, we've had some of those things set up for the farm tours. It's fun. We've also had a station for kids where they could actually try spinning. And since my daughter is in that age range, especially these last several years, my youngest, through that, I think she's kind of actually gotten excited in learning how to spin, and she's actually a decent hand spinner now.
I think the project itself was very much connected to pandemic and a feeling that we all felt, that we wanted to do things for people that we love and care about. And we wanted to do an object that it's comforting, but I think something that was very crucial for the successful of the work and for bringing people together is to have this beautiful location where things are possible. Almost every single thing, as crazy as it may sound back then, right? Like we needed to wash 250 pounds of wool by ourselves, and we never did it before. It's tons of water, and it's, and it's containers, and it's like, there is so many things like that we need to take into consideration. Almost every crazy idea, you came and say, it's possible. We will make it work, So and also all of this was in this beautiful location, like when you see the sky and all the animals, and, we have fish ponds, and I think people enjoy coming to the farm, really enjoy and embrace your point of view that you support this project and everything is possible, And I just have to explain that this is a very unique point of view, like even toward art. I don't like, I'm an artist, I've been in different organizations, and it's not that easy to find a place where you have people who support you and believe in your project and saying, yes, we are going to help you make it work, And sometimes artists have really crazy ideas, and the other things also have like a beautiful location that everyone can come together and work together and have the facility to do that, Many of the things that we needed to do, we didn't know how to do, and we needed to build them ourselves. And there was always the potential that things will not work out. Many of the places, you laugh now, but it was pretty tough sometimes, right? Like, and it's just like many. I really think that in order to make a good and interesting artwork, you need to take risk, but it's very hard to take risk alone. And usually you don't have the source to take that risk alone, And the farm was a place that really embraced and agree to try things out, to experiment, to play, and believe that everything will be all right, like it's and eventually everything was right, like everything was indeed all right. I didn't answer your question.
No, you did. You very much are. You're answering it very beautifully. the state grant, if you had asked me even 9 months before, that garage didn't look anything like it did. Okay, not a bit. It was a garage. It had a terrible floor. It was cold. It was no lighting. None of that equipment was in place. The furnace came the year before, and then I bought the picker, and I had some funds that I could quickly build those drying racks. And then that grant money for the third year came along, and I knew we needed a carding machine. So that's when I bought that. So, the experience of the first time that we saw the gray wool, on the table, all of that equipment had just come to the studio. Mm-hmm. So in a way, I think about the state grant funds and you arriving at the same time as really an amazing privilege, because you came with your needs just when I was able to have a heated space where we could set up all that processing, dry all those fibers in all those batches, and that you and I would be able to process the wool so that you could get the sculpture done that fall. But you gave all the equipment purpose. That's how I see this. I could have had those pieces of equipment there with no purpose whatsoever at that moment, because you gave me the gift of becoming an art collaborator. And I watched that equipment in your hands under your vision become a hidden part of a process that was us figuring out how to process pretty close to the way that it's always been done. And all those stories we shared about your grandmother and the experience of the mattresses that you grew up with, all of that equipment's changed now. That space is forever different because you were there. That's my part of this story.
Kelsang, do you want to tell us how you found Clear Spring Farm?
Oh, yeah, I heard about your farm few years back through Tibetan American Foundation. I heard about kids having camping over there. And then I have older parents who would like to see, a yacht during summer and have some summer relaxing time over there. So, at first I visited there with my friends right after camping. We all enjoyed it. We really liked it. And then I thought about taking my parents back. And that's how, we came back. And also I have seen you guys in some of the Tibetan events too. So in the past, few years.
Yes, like at the Dalai Lama's birthday party at Boom Island.
Yeah,
yeah, that was a spectacular event. It was great to have your dad. I know he's elderly and has a lot of health issues, but it was really nice to have him with you.
Yes, he loved. In fact, that's the only time he really enjoyed going out this, entire year. With the COVID, I mean, we couldn't travel, much. We couldn't go out much either. It was such a wonderful moment for them. And I really love the location. It's not too from, the city, yet, you have enough number of acreage for the yachts to wander. And we are really thankful for the facility you have. You have that small, motor vehicle for the, older people to, ride that. So that was really helpful for my dad, especially. And when I came there with my friends last summer, our teenagers really enjoyed it. It's so much fun to see the animal, in real, and then to be able to, pet them, touch them, take pictures, and then, we were just walking with them. I mean, it's a wonderful experience that, you cannot get anywhere here.
So for my dad, yak was everything. He grew up as nomad, and he was literally living in the middle of I would say, like a mountain. He was only 13. He had 100 plus yaks to look after, and his neighbors are like miles, far away. So yak was everything for him. He used to milk the yak. He used to, put them away for, in the mountain. And in the evening, I remember him saying he used to have 2 big, like mastiff dogs that would help him to bring the animals back in the evening. And then he would milk them. And then I heard that he would, fetch those milk in the city for the rest of the family member. And they would make, of course, butter out of it. So it was just the whole world for my father and his family back in Tibet. See, I need to wipe my tears first. That was such a, good experience. So in my culture, my dad told me that yak, or even a yak baby with a white dot on the forehead, it's always considered sacred and precious. So when we visited the farm last summer, one little yak came right to him, approached him with a little dot on his forehead. So that, gave him a real joy and, felt really special. So yeah, we would definitely come back every year. After we visited, I posted stuff online, and I've seen many others went there. We just, our community is so small. So it's such a joy to see many. I'm so glad that you guys are only like an hour from here, not like, we don't even have to fly to see yaks, So it's wonderful thing to have nearby. And I don't know, in the future with the COVID, we couldn't do much last year. I hope, you guys can host like summer camps. I'm sure that'll, help our younger generation to be able to, learn there while having so much fun. Kids, they don't like to stay in a classroom and learn things. They really like to, go out and explore, and looking forward, to have more camping, experience there in the future.
Heading into 2021, the biggest recommendation back to North Star Farm Tour was that farm members were looking for greater support with adapting to a digital environment and for figuring out new ways to do marketing in an era of COVID.
Well, to be perfectly honest, I would say the idea of inspiring young creative minds to look locally, to look in their backyards, to come up with something that could be a profession, be it fashion or farming, or even just like something to do with nature, is just fantastic. But then on top of it, like, it definitely was our relationship with North Star Farm Tours that made us say yes. Well, made me say yes, because any friend of theirs is a friend of ours.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that for as far as my answer. What made me say yes was the opportunity to open up the eyes of a younger generation into the possibility of working and collaborating across multiple fields. I think that's extremely important to us as a community, as a people, as a culture. And I think exactly like what Tim said, any friend of yours is a friend of ours. And so why wouldn't we say yes?
We were deeply honored to be invited by Tim and Tom Navarro to work on the Farm to Fashion project in 2019.
No, it was absolutely something that I felt I needed to carve out some time to do, and just feel so indebted to the organization for being able to be part of North Star Farm Tour, to kind of come in at the 11th hour when all this work had already been done for the grant application and things like that. I just wanted to, do my part. I come from a background where I do spend the 9 to 5 hours of my day largely involved in technology, and web and social media and things like that. So there were some things that I felt I could hopefully offer, because one thing that we did find out during the pandemic as well was, just because there was lockdown and people couldn't get out, that just almost made there more of a desire to connect with something outside of people's apartments or suburban living. So it was an interesting realization that, like, the more boxed in everyone became, the more awareness, the more desire there was for that farm experience. So any way you could bring that to people, whether it be the old-fashioned analog way of being on the farm or digitally, they're all for it.
We love animals and we love alpacas and stuff, and so if wherever we go, we always see if there is a farm, and she found it. And so we came yesterday, and she liked it so much that she told one of her friends that was in the program with her, like, I got to take you to this place. And we knew that today was also an open house, so we just came back. Plus, we really liked these pretzels they had. So we got the pretzels. I bought this. I also got, what else did I get? Oh, we got a scarf and some other stuff. I can't remember, but yeah. It was great. And also, we've been to lots of other ones, so I can give you the comparisons. I think one of the cool things about this one is that there's a couple of the alpacas on the female side that are very friendly. So from a photo perspective, it's really cool because we were able to take some really nice photos, which obviously is good for business purposes, right? And like shareability, if you will. Let me see if I can pull them up. So that was really neat. And then, see, this was me yesterday. Saying anything that's interactive, so like feeding them, we've like, since he has chickens and stuff, like we've been to some where we get to like, feed the chickens or take care of the eggs or what, all that stuff is fun, and different, and it's kind of educational too. But like, if you can actually have an experience and then something that you can take a picture about, then I think that creates that whole viral loop on social media and all that stuff. Anything where it makes it easy to discover this place. So whether it's Google ads, whether it's a Facebook, page, all the things, like the Airbnb experiences, I say, just because there's a lot of people here, that don't know what to do. Almost
Yeah.
everybody in her class didn't know what to do. You know,
Uh,
another thing you could do is like on websites, if whether it's this one, if you guys are all part of a community, just like, you know how like there's always like the recommended thing, you know, on Netflix and all these things, like check out also these other places. Yeah, and another thing that people do out in some of the places we stayed at one that was actually a bed and breakfast even. So you can come have breakfast and then see the animals, and then you end up at the gift shop and you buy stuff, you know, and all that. So anyways, I'll shut up now because I can come up with ideas forever.
As you just saw, there is an almost endless appetite for more on farms and agritourism and the people that visit. To better understand this, I thought it would be a really good idea to put out a needs assessment and Qualtrics survey, just directly asking the farmers, what were the problems that you were solving for the members? What was the value that you were bringing to each of the consumers that come and visit your farm? And how do you solve these issues? And how does North Star Farm Tours give you the resources necessary to solve these issues? On top of that, I also did phone interviews that were specifically empathy interviews, trying to get a better understanding of why the members themselves were involved with agritourism and why they wanted to share their agricultural experiences with the public. A lot of the people who visited the farms were looking for some sort of escape or visit to somewhere that they could spend time with their family and kind of disconnect from the outside world and all of the technology and social media and everything, and just get closer with the animals and kind of ground themselves in that a little bit. Specifically for the members, one of the biggest issues that they had was that there wasn't enough outreach, specifically on the internet, and they didn't know how to reach new consumers. The only thing they knew how to do was throw events for people who already knew about the farm and kind of what they wanted to do. And so there was also major outreach for either the Enactus Club or some other group to develop a some sort of marketing plan to help them better reach the consumers. So with the evaluation from Lauren Westenberg, the social media plan from Chad Gruby, who is a University of St. Thomas student, and the needs assessment written by me, I believe that these tools are really useful in helping us better understand the industry that we're in today. One of the really cool things about agritourism is that we're in new territory. It's not like opening up a coffee shop where somebody else has already done it a million times over and you can just copy their idea and somehow find some success. Instead, for us, we're treading new water and we need to figure out all of these things on our own, and we're kind of reinventing the wheel. And these three tools that we've developed will really help us better understand the industry that we're putting ourselves in today. As development committee chair, I decided it would be a good idea to get North Star Farm Tours and the University of St. Thomas connected as volunteer partners so that future students and incoming students would have a chance to work with North Star Farm Tours and help them build a better organization for its members, and at the same time also gather really cool learning experiences for the students at the University of St. Thomas. Alongside this, Enactus has been a standing partner with North Star Farm Tours for the last 2 to 3 years now, and will continue to do so through my overview, and I will kind of act as the bridge between the two entities as years go on. I'm really excited for the future of North Star Farm Tours and where it's headed. I think it has a really bright future.
first of all, I have absolutely loved being able to be a part of this organization and be in service to it, just because of how close it is to my interests, my own hobbies, and all of that stuff. I love being able to help other people out in those same spaces. And I think that I wish that I love that what you guys bring to the table is this interest in pushing this organization forward in new and more interesting ways. And let's play what if that had happened a few years prior, right? And you guys had pushed for this digital presence and all of this, and then COVID hits. And you are more prepared for that than anyone could have ever been. But of course, you know, hindsight is 2020, right? We go into this place, we have these events, and then suddenly everything is cut off. And we learned the hard way how important that presence and how important these efforts are to keep an organization going and growing in more interesting and new and innovative ways. And I would just say, like, I love that there's always been this push for this, that you guys understand the importance, or many of you understand the importance of it. And just, I would say my advice, and I would love to see that continue growing, because as I mentioned before, when you're working with a local area, if you don't have a way to get outside of that area, your growth is limited. Right. So only by embracing this digital, only by doing these things that you guys have been doing, are you going to be able to bring this organization to something much bigger than we've even talked about yet.
I think being on the tour, it, you know, educated me with like the safer faces, realizing how important it is to have the public aware of, you know, cleanliness, hand washing stations, and that sort of thing. That's honestly, that's not something that really gets me excited. So it's good to have other people looking out for me, because I don't know that I would have thought of that, because I'm out in the barn, you know, delivering lambs and then eating a donut, you know. So it never crosses my mind.
Well, I am down here in the very corner of the state. One of the things that North Star Farm Tour has really done for me is enabled me to join a group of very diverse fiber producers closer into the population center of the Twin Cities. So I've been able to not just be a lone farm out in the middle of nowhere, but it has provided a venue and also enough traffic. It's been great to have this whole cluster of farms that has been somewhat close to each other that I've been able to join and piggyback off of. There's also this wonderful synergy of people working on publicity, people who have been keeping me up to date on the concerns about zoonotic diseases, all of these things that I don't have the time to do. I'm a farmer and I have not enough hours in the day as it is, but I feel that those hours are amplified by being involved with this group of very talented, wide range of interests, all of these other farmers that are joining together to make it a successful community. And I like the idea of it being, they call it a learning community. That's just what it is. We learn from each other. And it's been a very worthwhile endeavor to be involved in gathering with these folks through the years.
Yeah, the pieces of advice that that I would give is seek out other farms, seek out other people who are doing kind of what you're doing. Maybe not exactly, but when we first got into this, friends put us in touch with, you know, people who were running an organic turkey operation. And then, you know, we found out, you know, we met another farm who was raising baby doll sheep. And it's really helpful to, especially when you're starting out. And my wife and I, we didn't come from a farming background either. So it was really helpful to get any kind of intel or advice, or just someone to use as a sounding board. It's like, hey, we got this idea. Do you have any experience with this? What do you think? So really that connection with other farms, with other people doing what you're doing is really phenomenal. So that'd be what that'd be the first thing I would recommend.
Having the formal evaluation was especially helpful for our development as an organization. It really played into the needs assessment that Jack Workman did for us, but it helped to flesh that out and enabled us to, especially in the time of COVID, really show that there was value. And in transitioning to the online presence of our group and the individual farms involved, I think we were at risk of maybe losing some of those folks because they kind of hunkered down. A lot of us did. But by having that needs assessment showing that not only them, but most of the others were also very concerned about maintaining a presence in spite of being isolated. And it was really good to have the numbers that said this many people did not want to have people on their farm or to have agritourism occurring because they didn't feel safe. And every once in a while, some of the members would forget that they had also agreed that it was not a good idea to have a 2021 tour. And it was good to have that in writing, have those numbers, the weight of the statistics. Having it longitudinal was also really beneficial because people changed, but they stayed the same. Every year, I'm sure that everyone said these funds came in very handy. They helped us to fill some of the voids. Sometimes you feel like you're a master juggler as a farmer, and by having some of those needs addressed to help you work towards your goals, sometimes instead of just the next day's to-do list, was really, really a nice relief. And it was fun also to see what other farmers thought were valuable additions to their farms' operations. So it was a wonderful, wonderful program. I'd like to see it continued again. I think it has to be agreed that it was a hands-down success. These microgrants helping the farmers to do some of their significant wants and needs for their farms.
In the fall of 2021, I repeated the survey that I'd conducted in 2019 and 2020 one more time. I asked farms how they'd invested their block grant funds. I looked at their farm size, farm activities, all of the same questions that I'd asked in the previous years to track how profitability and enjoyability had changed and how the nature of their farm businesses had changed as well. Ultimately, what I found is that more farms over time identified as being primarily commercial in nature. The number of farms that identified as being commercial increased from 2020 to 2021 as well, just as it had increased from 2019 to 2020. And for farms that did identify as being primarily commercial in nature, they did succeed in increasing their profits over time. In 2019, if you totaled the gross income from the 12 farmer cooperators, you got $45,000. By 2021, the total gross farm income across the 12 operations increased to $100,000. Farmers became more reliant on their farm income in terms of their total household income. And they diversified their business activities and adapted them to the changed circumstances of this COVID-19 pandemic. In 2019, primarily farm income came from on-farm product sales. And by 2021, 9% of the total farm income came from commercial contract sales, either to knitting shops or to restaurants for meat sales. There was a significant expansion of other farm income categories from farmers trying out new business structures that they hadn't even tried in 2019. and an increase in online and on-farm sales for farms that had started to expand into digital marketing. In terms of enjoyability, the highest level of enjoyability that farmers reported was actually in 2020. And this was because that was when they had the most time to enjoy their farm themselves and dedicate themselves to the parts of farming that really made it worth it for them. So we see this increase in satisfaction from about 87% level of satisfaction in 2019 to about 93% on average level of satisfaction in 2020. And then it dropped down to 80% level of satisfaction in 2021. And in looking at the survey responses where I asked people to really reflect on how satisfied they felt, I think the biggest driver in that drop from 2020 to 2021 in terms of enjoyability is because of the return of these off-farm time constraints and the requirements to be spending more time going back into the office, or concerns about this pandemic just continuing on. There was a lower level of optimism in the responses than you saw in 2020, and concern that they didn't have nearly as much time to dedicate to their farm activities as they had in the previous year. Overall, farms were still investing in new products development. Compared to 2020, fewer farms used their block grant funds in 2021 to cover basic farm expenses or feed and grain expenses. And instead, they were starting to do more speculative product development or to prepare themselves to engage in new activities that they had decided to participate in. A lot of farms bought new equipment in 2021, either for tracking predation on their agroforestry products or for improving the management of their flocks, or getting new fiber processing equipment to expand their fiber processing capabilities, or to have the resources they needed to host classes once they could have the public on their farms again. More farms also started improving their facilities because they decided to start hosting the public again, and needed to get things in shape to be able to safely host the public during this ongoing pandemic. And ultimately, they still cited concerns about marketing and time as their primary barriers to expanding their businesses and having them be more profitable and more enjoyable. The really interesting role of North Star Farm Tour and the involvement in it as a learning community came from how farms weathered this pandemic and understood new regulations that came up over time. Throughout the 3 years, I asked farms to reflect on their involvement in North Star Farm Tour and what that meant in terms of how they ran their agritourism operations. And in 2019, farms said that without North Star Farm Tour, they would not have been aware of the liability risks that they held in terms of public health and public safety to protect the visitors to their farms from zoonotic diseases. Having already engaged in a year's worth of a farm and safety mandate that they decided to participate in as an organization, and the adoption of hand washing stations meant that when COVID hit, the farms that decided to reopen to the public were significantly more prepared than they would have been otherwise. They had modular hand washing stations available. They knew and had all the proper signage to make sure that people knew how to stay safe. They felt like they better understood how to set up their facilities for safe public visits. And then once they needed to expand those visits to be socially distanced, they were more able to do so. So for farms that did choose to reopen, having been involved in North Star Farm Tour helped them do so in a way that was more successful. They said that having the camaraderie of other farmers that they felt were peers who they could ask questions of was incredibly useful, especially for farmers who don't come from the participants who don't come from farming families. They found a community of people to whom they could turn with questions or to sort through any of the challenges that they were finding with expanding on their businesses, and felt that they had a community there. Some farms did report that they were concerned that North Star Farm Tour was too focused on the policy pieces and the regulatory aspect of agritourism and the professionalization of the industry, and felt like they wished there was more space for informal connection. But it was difficult to do that during COVID, and that they weren't sure how to best engage in that type of informal connectivity with the other members of the organization. Overall, This has been a fascinating project to be involved with. I'm very grateful to the participants for allowing me to ask them a total of 600 questions, give or take, over the last 3 years, and for really helping me understand how their businesses have changed over time and what their experience was getting these funds from the state and making the decisions that they did in terms of investing and expanding their business over time. There is much more work to be done in this field. There is a huge need to understand how new regulations are developing, not only in Minnesota, but across the country, and how dealing with zoonotic diseases is going to be done at a state level, and how those liability risks rest differently on farms that are located in different states. There's a role for organizations like North Star Farm Tour to play in unifying the voices of agritourism operators within those conversations with regulatory agencies and with other organizations that are trying to support small farmers. And especially because agritourism operations are so incredibly diverse that they have different liability concerns depending on which production activities they're actually engaged in. Having some kind of organization that can help bring farmers together to talk about what they need or what will work realistically in terms of best practices could be a huge benefit and a huge resource for regulators looking to figure out how to best minimize risks that exist on these business operations. And third, there needs to be a much better understanding of which digital assets are most necessary for agritourism operators to access new consumers and markets, especially in an era of COVID. The agritourism industry, as an industry, runs on thin margins. And it's a big deal for farms to be dedicating a portion of their profits to expanding their digital platform. They say they don't have very much time, and managing a social media presence takes a significant amount of time. They don't have a lot of extra finances to be able to invest in adopting new digital media and new website platforms or building out new content to put on the web. But knowing how to make those investments more assuredly, more research to understand which digital assets are most beneficial to agritourism operators looking to connect with the public could be a huge resource to farmers as they try and figure out which investments to start investing in and which platforms to spend their time learning and honing to reach the public in a more effective way. So thank you for listening, and thank you to the participants for their time over the last few years and for the opportunity to spend a part of my master's really working on something that's cutting new ground.
This video is about what we have done, not the future. Our management tips for anyone wanting to do agritourism should be driven from the experience of the grant, as we just explained it from multiple perspectives. Number 1, agritourism must be safe. Certification in Safer Faces is the single most important step to understanding what that means for you, your insurance requirements, the readiness of your facilities, and your responsibilities as a host. Number 2, agritourism is fun, and consumer demand has never been higher than right now. If you own acreage, have animals and birds and pets, have a green thumb for growing things, and skills for being a farmer, shepherd, cook, artist, naturalist, gardener, or any other lost art, there are people who believe it's fun to learn what you know, buy what you produce, and have fun being a farmer, even if it's for a tour, a class, or a farm stay. Number 3, agritourism is an important, effective education bridge between farmers of any size and urban consumers. Our small group of family farmers learned our role as educators is never ending. It happens in every conversation we have. People like Miguel and Nadina Rive, filled with desire to do farm chores, and ask many questions. Deep down, a lot of visitors dream of a farm someday. As individual grant recipients, the 11 of us empathize completely. That's why our agritourism stories are full of laughter and tears and gratitude. These small grants made a big difference. The North Star Farm Tour story is necessarily different. We learned that we couldn't just be a gathering of friends who invited people to visit anymore. Agritourism in this time of complex modern life must be managed legally and safely to prevent serious consequences. Farms are full of risk to every person who owns them, works at them, or visits. It's unwise to underestimate that fact. You heard it said today that there is no professional agritourism association between federal and state agencies and farmers. We want to raise our hand. North Star Farm Tour is a tiny organization, but we are on a mission to deserve that designation for our members. We want agritourism to remain as self-regulated as possible. We do that by ensuring every member is up to date on regulations that do exist and is equipped to be a champion for public health. Then it's all about fun and educational agritourism, and everybody wins. Thanks for watching this outreach presentation. If you have any questions, comments, or are interested in North Star Farm Tour, please contact us.
Find a community like North Star Farm Tour. Social media, you are a fool not to use it. And make sure you're also using your own products, because if you're not using them, why would anyone else want to? Wonderful. SADG grant, it's allowed me to do things I didn't think I could do. I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. Like the sock project the first year, and being able to actually enjoy my own products for myself and make something for myself with them.
Oh, just thank you so much for the support and the opportunity to be a part of a program like this. The day that we got our metal sign, that yellow sign that said we're a sustainable agricultural demonstration farm, that was so validating. I mean, forever. Even if we're not on the farm someday and we go somewhere else, that sign's coming with. That was just that meant so much to be that we're doing something right, and Department of Agriculture is recognizing what we're doing. That was unbelievable. It was a small little thing. Here's your metal sign, but it just hit hard. It was awesome. So thank you to the state of Minnesota for the support and just allowing us to keep doing what we love to do and share it with other people.
So yeah, I guess I would just say, thanks to the state of Minnesota for the SADG grant that has helped support the farm through improvements, but then also making it more feasible to share the farm with other people, with people that don't have the opportunity to live on a farm or grow up on a farm.